Corbett of CorbettReport.com with your Sunday update for this 6th day of February 2011. And now, for the real news. In a remarkable development for Canadians fighting to keep the toxic hexafluorosilicic acid, commonly mistakenly referred to as sodium fluoride, out of municipal drinking water, Calgary City Council's Utilities and Environment Committee has recommended the removal of the neurotoxin chemical from the city water supply. The council will vote on how to proceed with the motion at a session on Monday. Yesterday, Dr. James Beck, Professor Emeritus of Medical Biophysics at the University of Calgary, appeared on the Corbett Report to discuss the decision and its ramifications.
During that discussion, all that day, two things came up that could delay things. One was the idea of a panel of experts to review fluoridation and advise the council. Now, we've had one of those panels of, I say, so-called experts, because there were 5 on that panel. I think the only one that was really qualified to make a judgment on part of the issue was a statistician. And he issued a minority report. The majority report was to continue fluoridation but reduce the concentration of the water from 1 part per million to 0.7 parts per million. So the other thing that arose during the discussion, aside from a panel of experts, another one would be to have another plebiscite. Well, the plebiscite, in my view, is just absurd now as it was before. But because of the suggestion of a plebiscite, there's been a lot of there have been letters and editorials and so on in the press, some of which say that that's only right, that people be given the freedom of choice and so on. But if a plebiscite is held and you vote in favor of fluoridation and it passes, then only those voters have the freedom of choice. The ones who don't want fluoridation don't have any freedom of choice.
The decision is all the more stunning in light of a new campaign which is on the verge of getting the fluoride removed from the water supply in New York City. These municipal fluoride removal movements and hundreds of others across North America are gaining steam as part of a general trend of an increasingly informed and active citizenry standing up for their medical freedoms and working against the process of mass medication through the water supply. These movements are buoyed by a recent announcement from the EPA that the maximum allowable level of sodium fluoride in drinking water in the United States has been reduced from 1.2 parts per million to 0.7 parts per million. Dr. Paul Conant of the Fluoride Action Network joined the Corbett Report last week to discuss reaction to that bombshell decision. And I guess we have to start with the EPA's recent decision to reduce the maximum allowable levels of fluoride in water fluoridation.
Well, yes, that was the event of January the 7th, which was explosive. It wasn't just the EPA, it was also the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the parent body for the Center of Disease Control that's been promoting fluoridation so aggressively in the United States for many, many years. And they finally admitted that, rather about 50 years too late, that the levels that they're using are too high because of all the other sources of fluoride, resulting, incidentally, in 41% of children in the United States aged 12 to 15 having dental fluorosis, which is an indicator of overexposure to fluoride. So our kids in America are being overexposed to fluoride. They finally recognized that. What they should have done, of course, was to stop water fluoridation. What they have done is a rather weak compromise of lowering the so-called optimal mythical level, which is supposed to reduce tooth decay to 0.7 instead of the range of 0.7 and 1.2. Now, this was coupled with some very disturbing information. In fact, the EPA, the US EPA, or the Water Division, Office of Water, after nearly 5 years' delay, has finally responded to the National Research Council's recommendation that they lower the safe drinking water standard for fluoride. What was disturbing about the EPA's announcement is that they're working hand in glove with the Department of Health and Human Services, which amounts to reducing the safe drinking water standard without, notice this, without threatening the water fluoridation program.
In other health news, billionaire eugenicist Bill Gates went on CNN last week to discuss his tax-free charitable foundation's efforts to mass vaccinate the third world.
$10 billion over the next 10 years to make it the year of the vaccines. What does that mean exactly?
Well, over this decade, we believe unbelievable progress can be made, both inventing new vaccines and making sure they get out to all the children who need them. We could cut the number of children who die every year from about 9 million to half of that if we have success on it. And the benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, it really allows a society a chance to take care of itself once you've made that intervention.
Experts are puzzled, however, by his apparent contradiction of his own earlier comments on the purpose and the nature of vaccination in the third world.
We could cut the number of children who die every year from about 9 million to half of that. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
That Bill Gates is generally in favor of human depopulation is now no longer disputed, as his appearance at a billionaires conference in 2009 that concluded overpopulation was the greatest threat to humanity, and his remarks last year that old people should be killed in order for teachers to keep their jobs have now revealed.
An official at the Gates Foundation told ABCnews.com the overwhelming reason for the meeting was need. That was the issue that galvanized everyone to participate. Together, they've given away $70 billion since 1996. And with the sagging economy, their help could be just what struggling charities need.
As the medical cost goes up, and that shows up both in state budgets as so-called state Medicaid spending, and it shows up in the federal budget as Medicare, and their part of Medicaid, it squeezes out everything else. So right now what you see is it's squeezing higher education. You're raising tuitions at the University of California as rapidly as they can, and so the access that used to be available to the middle class or whatever is just rapidly going away. That's a trade-off society is making because of very, very high medical costs and a lack of willingness to say, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers and to make that trade-off in medical costs? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
After the scandal of a WHO-administered tetanus vaccine in the 1990s that was found to cause spontaneous abortions in the women who received them, and after a polio vaccination campaign in Nigeria caused a vaccine-induced surge in polio, third world populations have been rejecting the benevolent vaccines of rich eugenicist monopolists in large numbers. So concerned is Gates and his foundation with making sure that third world populations get their vaccines, however, that the Gates Foundation began awarding funds to Japanese scientists in 2008 to engineer vaccines into mosquitoes that could then be released to deliver injections through their bites. Last year it was announced that the scientists were successful in creating genetically altered mosquitoes that were capable of delivering injections via their bites.
Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience.
In other disheartening news, the United States Department of Agriculture has shocked and horrified organic producers and consumers by allowing not only the planting of genetically engineered alfalfa, but also by allowing farmers to plant Monsanto's experimental Roundup-ready sugar beets, despite the fact that there is a court order banning the planting of GM sugar beets until environmental impact assessments can be done. The about-face on these issues after the USDA's earlier acknowledgments that organic producers had legitimate concerns about the planting of such GM crops have stunned some, but recent reports show that it is due to White House influence. As the Wall Street Journal is now reporting, these developments are directly tied to Obama's recent pledge in an op-ed in its own publication to deregulate the U.S. economy. The Obama administration Thursday abandoned a proposal to restrict planting of genetically engineered alfalfa, the latest rulemaking proposal shelved as part of the administration's review of burdensome regulation. Even more worryingly, some of the biggest organic retailers, from Whole Foods Market to Organic Valley to Stonyfield Farm, have announced that they are no longer opposed to the commercialization of genetically modified crops. These latest decisions, as experts like Strauss Family Creamery President Albert Strauss are noting, means that an even greater percentage of most Americans' dinner plates will consist of genetically modified ingredients.
Because these threats are getting bigger and bigger, 86% of our corn is genetically modified in this country, 93% of the soybeans, and alfalfa is, I think, the fourth largest crop in the country. So we need to have labeling of genetically engineered food so that consumers can make the choice whether to buy it or not. Most of our consumers don't want genetically engineered food. It's in close to 80% of the food now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, please go to CorbettReport.com to download episode 174 of the Corbett Report podcast, Patriot Mythology, where we set the record straight on common misconceptions from spurious quotations to JFK and the Fed to the Fat Bin Laden video.